Hey guys, what's up? Ludicrousness here. We've got our fourth match for Reddit Twilight Struggle B League for 2019 in the 4th Division. So today we're up against, as you can see, hcd199. This is a really strong player that I played actually last season in the 5th Division, who came up with me at the same time. We're going to be doing a 60-minute match, +2 for the US. So let's see how it goes. So as you can see, I'm going to be playing the Soviets. So last time, as you can see, I'm actually up 1 against HCD. So I did get very lucky in that match, and I certainly do not anticipate that kind of luck this time. So let's see what turn 1 brings. Okay, so looking at my opening hand here, there's a few good things to it. I like NATO, definitely. I like NATO, no question. Captured Nazi Scientist is pretty great. That'll probably be my headline, potentially. Austria, probably. I'd like to be able to ditch Europe's scoring in the headline, actually, now that I look at this. And the opening coup in Iran is going to be very important if I'm going to be able to establish initial domination, or potentially a domination in the Middle East. And we're probably going to have to wait for some combination of de Gaulle, Suez, something like that to be able to take domination in Europe in the future, or at least the third battleground. I think it has to be Europe scoring. I need to get rid of it. And there's no chance of me being able to establish a domination here without without socialist governments. So let's go for that. So we got containment. Yeah, that's a really good one for sure. That's going to give him a pretty strong ops advantage here, since I really only have kind of like one really good ops card with NATO. I think I do probably have to go for the coup, and we'll see what it brings. I need to try to establish something in the Middle East here, stop him from being able to have a domination before the end of the turn. So I think we'll go for the opening coup in Iran. We rolled a 4, so that's kind of like an average result. Getting 2 there is pretty good. He's probably going to coup back, but the good news is that potentially gives me the final counter coup of the turn. And assuming that that goes well, then I should be able to score the Middle East, at the very worst, at neutral. So that would be pretty good. We're going to play Captured Nazi Scientist for the event, 100%. We want to get rid of CIA created before the end of the turn. It's actually kind of nice that we can hopefully defuse that fairly early here. So I won't have to worry about that hanging over my head the rest of the match. I've got a few kind of middling ops cards here with Formosan and Olympic Games. My hold card this turn, if I don't get a chance to event it, I might go for Captured Nazi Scientist. So he's going for blockade and he's tossing the Korean War. So he immediately takes South Korea. That's a power play, I don't mind saying. But in this case, I think that actually gives me the chance to score the Middle East with him presence-less. So that was kind of an interesting move, not going for a counter coup like that. I'm trying to decide if it's worth trying to establish an actual domination. My impression is that it's probably not. So I think we'll take those 4 points immediately. That seems like a pretty strong play. And the Korean War is going to be coming back out, so that'll give me another opportunity to take South Korea in the future. So 4 points right up front is pretty great. It's going to be a little tougher trying to take anything in Asia here with him having locked down South Korea and without either Vietnam revolts or... interesting. So he immediately goes for Malaysia, as well as a bunch of stuff over there. So I'm certainly not going to coup Egypt. I think that's kind of a fool's errand. I'm probably not going to coup Lebanon, because it doesn't really matter too much. Malaysia is tempting without having any access, I will say that. And I think in this case, CIA created probably makes a good amount of sense before he gets the bright idea to play Fidel. I'd just kind of like to get it out of my hand. So I think we're going to go ahead and trigger that right now. Bite the bullet, he gets to see my hand for the rest of the turn, and we'll go from there. See what he can do with that. Now the real, the real shame with this is that he does get 2 ops out of it because he is under containment. But, you just have to get rid of CIA created at the earliest possible opportunity. And this is definitely that. So he went for a coup on Iran. He failed on it, which is pretty great. So the good news there is that if I drop DEFCON by 1 more, probably with a coup on Panama over here, that's probably my best chance of a good result. And with the CIA created now disarmed, it's not really like a huge risk or anything. I'm going to get Egypt eventually with Nasser, and also Middle East just scored anyway, so it doesn't really matter too much. I got a 5 there, so that's pretty good. That's going to give me a good early lead in Central America. It's going to stop any fun, turns, or excuse me, AR6 plays where he might try to get down into Colombia. So Western Asia is shaping up to look pretty good for me here. Southeast Asia could certainly be challenging. Well, he's under containment. He can take a lot of stuff down there. He's also playing UN intervention for ops, which strongly implies that he probably has something along the lines of decall or destall that he's holding on to. So what are my options here? I need to take a second battleground. I think that's pretty clear. So I think I'm probably going to go ahead and take Pakistan. If he's sitting on the Indo-Pakistani war, he's got a 1/3 chance of being able to flip it. That's pretty strong. But if he's sitting on Asia scoring, which I would say the South Korea move pretty strongly suggests, then I think it's probably very important that I try to race him on battleground country count here. So let's go ahead and try that. See what happens. If he goes for the Indo-Pakistani war, hey, more power to him. 2/3 of the time I do come out ahead, so that's pretty solid. He spaces Vietnam revolts, which I think makes a lot of sense. He fails on it, which is great, because that means that I can go ahead and... that actually isn't really mandatory, but it's probably better to save like a stronger play for kind of like my last move of the turn. So let's go ahead and play that right now. So I definitely like that. Now the question is, do I event Formosan resolution? And, okay, perfect. He was sitting on Asia scoring, kind of like I suspected there. Part of me really thinks the answer here has to be, I do not event Formosan. Now, my reasoning for that is pretty straightforward. Basically, we're strongly shaping up, assuming Korean War fails, at 3-3 battlegrounds in Asia, and I think I'm going to find it very difficult to flip anything in Southeast Asia if I don't get decolonization. So, barring anything really strange, and the Indo-Pakistani War could flip one of those, I don't necessarily want to give him Taiwan as a 4th battleground. So, on the other hand, East European unrest, I think I might actually take this opportunity to try to get a little further ahead on the space race and space East European. If I can avoid playing it, I would prefer that. And, I might have to do something with Formosan in the future. Maybe I should just space Formosan so I've got a 3-op instead for next turn. I think I like that. I got ahead on the space race, so I think that's probably pretty solid. Okay, so all 3 scoring cards came out turn 1. I'm 6 points up from that. I was able to score the Middle East empty, and I got ahead on the space race early, which puts me in line for the next space race VP bonus, hopefully before the mid-war. So that's pretty solid. And we also saw Truman Doctrine go away, which is really good. And he also grabbed a bunch of that stuff down in Southeast Asia. He also did not hold decall. I forgot that he was playing blockade there, which did shrink his hand size as well. So the great news here is that I got de-Stalinization. That makes me really happy that I didn't play East European Unrest already because it means that I've got a little bit of spare influence that I might want to throw around. I've also got Suez Crisis. De Gaulle leads France is definitely a really good one. So I'm definitely not going to risk de-Stalinization as my headline. Among other things, there's just not enough influence that I want to pull out yet. I think I would risk De Gaulle leads France as my headline. It's really strong. He does have about a 50-50 chance. 2, 3. I think he drew 8 cards. Yeah, so he's got a slightly better than 50-50 chance of having defectors in his hand. But part of it also is I don't really have any other great headlines that I'd like to use. So I think we'll go for De Gaulle leads France and see what happens. We got the Indo-Pakistani War, so he is trying to flip Pakistan here. He does have that 1/3 chance. Let's see what happens. Okay, so he got it. That's pretty frustrating. It's going to make Asia very difficult for me. There's no question about that. But the really good news is that means that I do get France. And I'm debating in this case potentially going even further with it here and taking both France... Oh, not the China card, I'm sorry. And potentially taking both France and also Portugal to be able to establish that domination. But I don't think it's like a huge priority yet. I do want to take it, but he's almost certainly going to take a coup here instead. So I think what I would rather do is play... Let's think this through. He's probably going to target Panama unless he goes for Iran. I think Panama is probably his higher value target here. So I would probably go 1 into Costa Rica, which allows me to keep some presence in Central America here. Let's go ahead and try that. He's already got his Milops for the turn, so that's not really a huge deal. And I think we're just going to go from there and see what happens. So he was able to flip Pakistan. That's pretty unfortunate. You know, those wars are some of the swingiest, most powerful things in the game. I think, as we definitely saw in the last game that I uploaded as well. But let's see what he goes for. I assume he's going to go for the coup, in which case I immediately take Portugal. That's quite important. It also gives me the beeline into Africa, which is pretty great. Now, Asia is going to be extremely challenging for me. I don't think there's any getting around that. The Korean War is kind of around to flip things. And with that in mind, I probably want to hold on to the US-Japan Mutual Defense Pact, you know, if possible. Special relationship isn't a huge deal right now, especially if I play it into the UK to break it, which is probably the strongest move that I could make, just because I don't really want him to have one in France with access to Algeria. De-Stalinization is very important. I'd like to see Romanian abdication go out first so that I can strip that influence away, just because I'm not a big fan of stripping East Germany and Poland of their influence, kind of if I can avoid it here. If I do play special relationship into the UK, I would potentially be able to take that influence point out with de-Stalinization later in the turn as well. So let's see what he goes for. He's probably deciding right now if he wants to coup or not, and if he does, where he wants that coup to be. So Asia's looking quite challenging. I don't want to say that I'm giving it up for lost. Oh, he is doing influence. Okay, that's pretty interesting, actually. So he's protecting a bunch of that stuff. I think in that case, I probably do go for my Milops. I feel like that's pretty important. Now, the question is where I go for my Milops. If I coup South Africa, I would say that's the best overall result if I get a 5 or a 6, because I can knock him out of there before he gets a chance to expand into Angola. On the other hand, if I coup Egypt, it's a slightly... But it's not really a slightly better chance of success, since he has access from Israel to play back in. I think South Africa is probably the right choice here. It gives me the best overall result, assuming that I do fairly well. I didn't get a decent result on that, but I did drop DEFCON. I got my Milops, which is pretty great. And then we're just going to have to go from there. So let's kind of plan out the rest of my turn here. I think I'd like to hold on to de-Stalinization, if possible. It just strikes me as kind of like a better opportunity in turn 3 compared to turn 2. I don't really have the momentum right now to be able to start expanding into South America and so on. But the great news is that he doesn't really have any kind of a way in there. Without CIA created, there's really no opportunity for that to occur. So he goes for defectors. Obviously, that makes a lot of sense. I can't really fault him for any of that. And I think what I would probably do now is, let's see. East European unrest gives me Algeria. On the other hand, if I do pop destalinisation right now, that stems him off in Zaire. I can coup Angola next turn. I think that's probably, now that he's making those threatening moves, that is the most important thing that I can do. I can take that one out of Costa Rica, which is pretty great, and I can take one more, which I really don't want to, but I guess it's coming out of Poland. So let's see, one into Zaire. I've already got the beeline on Algeria, which is pretty great. I've got the beeline on Panama. We're going to do Chile, Venezuela, and Brazil. I think that's a pretty good overall result from it here, and we're going to have to hope that we get some kind of miracle in Asia coming up here. So that's going to be very challenging, I'm not going to lie. Okay, but I think securing those mid-war regions is probably more important. Okay, so the other things that really need to happen here, we're probably going to play East European unrest as much as I hate it. We're going to hold US-Japan past the reshuffle and probably space it. Hope for Korean War probably in the redraw. Remember that I do also have 2 points. Oh, thank you for Comecon. That makes East European unrest definitely a lot more palatable, I would say. I think that is... Independent Reds is gone, so I think Bulgaria is probably pretty safe. Let's see what he goes for this. Libya, I think, makes a lot of sense if I'm him, and potentially also India. Let's see what he decides for. Yeah, Asia's gonna suck. I don't think there's really any getting around that. Okay, hopefully I should get a nice strong coup on Algeria next turn. He might actually go for immediate realignments. He goes for influence instead. That makes sense too. He goes for Libya, and yeah, he's expanding all down there. That makes perfect sense to me. I think in this case, I probably do... Do I pop the UK like that? It's not the strongest move. And he is making like some threatening moves down here. I probably want to take Saudi Arabia. It's a very secure battleground in the Middle East for me until the late war. And it's going to stop any chance of him really being able to establish a domination in the Middle East here. I think that's probably a pretty decent move. I wasn't sure if I was going to play East European unrest, but after he played Comecon, that kind of made my decision for me. So let's see what happens next. 5 and 6. I get Fidel, which I definitely want to trigger for the event, because that's my beeline into Cuba. And I think aside from that, I need to decide exactly what I'm going to do with special relationship here. He's probably going to try to pop France if I don't overprotect it. I'm considering biting the bullet on US-Japan Mutual Defense Pact, but I really don't want to make the Korean War easier for him. Him having taken that turn 1 AR1, that's a risky proposition when the Korean War is going to come out eventually. So I'd like to make that as risky as possible for him. So let's see what we can accomplish here. Maybe I play special relationship just 2 into France. That does leave it overprotected, which is pretty great. Let's see what he goes for here. He's going to be pulling out East Germany, Poland, and probably Yugoslav. And I would say we're in an interesting position. I've got a good head start on the Americas, but there are a few things that can change that. I will mention that we haven't seen duck and cover yet, so that's potentially some easy easy points for him next turn if he headlines that. CIA created is gone, which is always great. I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ops to take total control of South America, which I would definitely like to do, if at all possible, before the end of turn 3, because that gives me, potentially a very strong position in South America. Let's see what he goes for. Duck and cover. Okay, so that's good to see it go, because it means that potentially he's not looking at all those points next time. He's getting ready to play the Arab-Israeli War. I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to go ahead and probably... I was thinking about doing that, but it is probably more important, all things considered, to be able to overprotect France here. So, maybe I just go for Fidel in this case, 1 into France, and I'm trying to decide if I should diversify a little down in... Let's go for... Let's kick the can a little bit. We'll space special relationship. I failed on that, but that's kind of okay. And I'm going to decide what to do with the last action round of my turn here. So I want to overprotect France because Truman could still come back out. Definitely. And I'd like to take Iraq. The only way I see that all of that is possible is unfortunately with the US-Japan Mutual Defense Pact. He plays Nasser. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. And he goes 1 for influence, which he's going to be playing into Israel. So now he's totally protected against the Arab-Israeli war. That makes a lot of sense. In this case, if I take Egypt and Syria, that does not give me domination because he's got the country count on it. So instead, I want to overprotect France. He's already got domination in Asia. That's going to be very tough to flip. But if I do flip it, it's going to be by holding on to the US-Japan Pact. So let's do 1 into France, and I also want 1 into Zaire, I think. Or do I want to overprotect North Korea? Let's assume he's got a 4-ops card at his disposal. There have definitely been a couple of them that came out. We saw Red Scare Purge, and I believe I used NATO turn 1. So there's 3 of them remaining. 1 of them is in my hand. That leaves the US-Japan Pact and also Marshall Plan. So if he is holding both of those, or at least 1 of them, he could make a pretty strong play on France here by jamming 2 into it. I think I would rather overprotect France by 2, so that there's no possibility of him breaking it for a Truman headline here, since I need to hold on to that 3rd battleground here. I think the best AR6 play that he could make would be popping Zaire would be pretty strong, but we're just going to have to see how it goes, I think. I'd like to hold US-Japan in case I do draw the Korean War in the reshuffle, and make that as problematic as possible for him. Okay. So, like I said, I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ops to take that South American control, and we are definitely going to be looking to try to establish that before the end of turn 3. So I'm hoping that I draw a pretty good ops hand next turn. We haven't seen Warsaw Pact either, so that's going to give me some good countries in Europe as well. He's sitting at 4 countries right now, and I've got 3. Romanian Abdication will give me 1, and then Warsaw Pact, I'll probably buff up Bulgaria for it, and that's going to give me 5 countries total without really having to do any work for it, assuming that he got Warsaw Pact. And then after that, we're just going to be putting the remainder, assuming it comes out, we're going to be putting 2 into Poland and 1 into East Germany to bring it to 5 and 5. I think I kind of like the sounds of that. That gets us pretty well set for the mid-war. So he did have Marshall Plan. That makes me really happy about my decision with France. And he decided to pop North Korea instead. So that's definitely a really, really good one for him, where he was able to stop a lot of that from happening. Okay, so let's see what we got here. Cambridge 5 is really good, because it'll tell me if he drew Asia scoring. He gets 11 points right now from Asia scoring, which is a lot of points. The thing is, I'm not 100% sure if, in fact, I'm pretty certain Cambridge 5 does not trigger if he headlines it. So if he headlines Asia scoring here, I don't want to say I'm screwed. I'm in a bad position, but let's go for it and see if he drew Europe as well. I don't really have many other really strong headlines, so let's go ahead and trigger Cambridge 5 and see where that gets us. He got Europe scoring, so that's kind of okay. And he doesn't have Asia, so that's pretty great. Romanian abdication doesn't really matter right now, and I need to take my coup. So we're going to use defectors to do it. And we're going to go ahead and coup probably Algeria here. I think makes the most sense, cut him off in the mid-war regions. I really need to press my advantage in the mid-war sections at this point, since I was denied any kind of real access or meaningful access to Asia here. So let's go ahead and coup Angola. I got a 6, so he's probably not taking Angola back anytime soon. So let's see if this is feasible with kind of my plan for South America. I need to retake North Korea here, definitely. And I need to start playing into South America. NORAD, I'm not desperate enough to play it here. There are conditions where I would seriously consider eventing NORAD. Okay, I get Warsaw Pact, so that's actually pretty good. We're going to go ahead and add that. So we're going to do exactly what I was talking about before. And, you know, it might be a little bit of a waste playing Bulgaria like that compared to putting one more into East Germany, but I think it's probably worth it in this case. Let's just see what happens. So he gets 3 from that. And let's see what he decides to go for. It would be pretty strong if he took Egypt in this case. That would probably force me to respond in Iraq. Otherwise, I'm probably going to ditch Middle East scoring almost immediately for neutral. He decided to go for North Korea, so that makes a lot of sense. So, in this case, I think that I would probably retake North Korea. I think makes, you know, a good amount of sense here. Obviously, he's trying to distract me quite a lot from kind of like what's going on in the other regions. And knowing that, I am a little tempted just to take that and then start to kind of press my advantage here in those mid-war sections. After all, I have a lot of places that I want to play, and it's going to be quite challenging to be able to do them all. On the other hand, if he is holding the Korean War, I don't want to make that any easier for him, but 4 ops from him right now just takes North Korea outright, and I know that he is sitting on some of those. So let's stick with that plan of taking a bunch of stuff down here and holding on, I guess, just to a single bastion in Asia. It does make his life easier. Asia scores really big for him, but having a massive lead in Africa, South America, and Panama, I think it's pretty hard to understate the importance of that. I'd like to trigger Special Relationship coming up here as well. I'm going to play those 2 down into Algeria, so I'll give him the access, but I'm going to take away any kind of benefit that he would get out of it. I also need to overprotect North Korea before the end of the turn. It's going to be very important that I don't lose that over the course of the game. So let's see what happens. I also need to toss the Middle East as soon as possible here. The only way that... Oh, UN intervention? All right. Is that decolonization? Socialist governments. That's a good one. He is going for those realignments, and he's going for Chile. Let's see if he gets lucky for it. That's probably pretty smart since he knows that I am starting to expand down there. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So in this case, I think we will probably go ahead and take those 2 in Algeria with Special Relationship. That makes perfect sense. Give that a shot. I'd like to space NORAD before the end of the turn, so I get 3 more actions. Those are probably going to be Middle East scoring, which I need to score for neutral. NORAD is probably going to go to space, just because I don't want the chance of him being able to one small step me in the mid-war. And let's see what else we can do here. So he goes ahead and spaces decolonization. That makes a lot of sense. He fails on that, which is pretty great. We're going to go ahead and I think probably just score the Middle East right now before it gets any worse. So I get 2 more action rounds. One of those is definitely going to be going into Panama. And then I need to decide what to do with the last one. Probably NORAD to space, I think, makes the most sense. Okay. So there are definitely a few good things here. Getting the lead on South America is really strong. And I also need to remember that I definitely need to get another one into Venezuela before the end of the turn here. I think we'll space NORAD first. I failed on that one again, but the good news is that he doesn't get NORAD. And I also desperately need to overprotect North Korea. Because, he can just keep making that play and potentially costing me 4 points every time if he does draw Asia scoring in the headline. So I'm going to be at a losing position in Asia most of the game here. That is almost unavoidable. South African unrest is going to be a really good one to look out for next turn. since that's going to give me a really good realignment position against South Africa by being able to put those two into Botswana. So I would say I'm reasonably happy coming out of the early war with kind of the way that this has shaken out. But we're going to have to see what happens. So probably my last move is going to be one Venezuela, one North Korea. If he makes any really threatening moves, I'm probably going to have to play the China card to address kind of like all of my different threats. Okay. So haven't seen Vietnam revolts. I didn't get decolonization. Not really a lot of ways that I've really found into Asia here. But I will point out he also hasn't taken control of India yet, which means, oh, there we go, nuclear test ban. I knew he had a 4-op card. So he decided to go for Botswana, setting up kind of like a realignment position there. I think that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, he's worried about some of the same stuff that I am. And we're going to go ahead and overprotect Venezuela as well. So let's see what happens here. Just expanding a little bit. You know, that turns Botswana into a pretty good target, like for Che or anything like that. So I don't necessarily mind that, since Che is no longer a free play for him. And let's see what he decides to go for here. So I am sitting on Romanian abdication, which interestingly enough gives me domination in Europe, which isn't really worth very much right now, since Europe's scoring already came out. So as long as I can secure Iraq at some point, then Middle East domination isn't going to be a real concern. And there are things that can flip it as well. Muslim revolution could potentially be very strong at some point. So let's see what happens. He's got his AR-6 here. He needs to decide what to do with it. France is overprotected. North Korea is overprotected. Middle East has already scored, and Angola is disgustingly overprotected. So I am struggling a little bit to see what like a really good AR-6 play looks like from him right now. Really the dream that I'm looking for here. Okay, so I did get Vietnam revolts, which is actually kind of good news. That gives me a little bit more access in Asia there. And he's going down into Guatemala, which again, if I do draw Che, I'm going to have kind of like a field day here. The bad news is that he has a temporary domination in Central America, but that doesn't really count for too much here. So Central America scores for 4 for him right now. Let's see what my options are. I definitely drew some really good cards here. Quagmire is always nice. I like Suez Crisis. Now I don't believe... Defectors is in the discard, which means that I've definitely got a few options here. Camp David Accords will probably go to space. I like Brush War a lot, but I would need to pick the right target for it, which would probably be Thailand. A 50-50 of being able to flip Thailand at this stage of the game, I think that's really powerful. If he has Central America scoring, that's 4 points for him, and that's kind of well done. But I need to make something happen in Asia, and it seems to me that Brush War is probably the best way to do that. Africa scoring, I think, is pretty good. I'm going to be able to get some use out of that. So let's go ahead and try Brush War and see what happens. He goes for nuclear subs, so that's definitely a really good one. We're going to go ahead. Awesome. We got Thailand, so that's really nice to see. He's going to be going a little bit ham in Africa right now. So let's just think through kind of like what our options are at this stage. I control 3 battlegrounds right now, and he controls 1. I could take a domination by playing Saharan states in Cameroon, but the downside to that is that it means he can immediately coup one of them and tie it up at 2 battlegrounds to 2 battlegrounds. So I can't say that I really love that. On the other hand, if I play down into Uruguay, that could potentially give me a really good opportunity. I'm probably going to keep DEFCON a little bit higher here. I like that as a general play when nuclear subs is in effect, because it means that I can kind of take advantage of the fact that he can't drop DEFCON. So I think, all things considered, I'm just going to take the 2 points in Africa. With nuclear subs, I don't really see it getting any better for me. Let's go ahead and try that, and we'll go from there. So he's probably going to be cooing either Brazil or Panama here. He can't drop DEFCON, which means that I can coup back with We Will Bury You. So being able to kind of get that last move is pretty strong, but he can kind of just keep cooing over and over here, so it's not really like the strongest play. Camp David Accords is definitely going to space. Quagmire I'd like to trigger for the event. He has ABM Treaty, which is actually kind of weird. I guess he's going for Thailand. He kind of failed that one. But That's pretty interesting. Since he can just kind of keep cooing there, since he doesn't drop defcon. So that's an interesting play. I'm trying to decide what the right response to that is. If he plays 4 ops in there, I can't take it back with the China card. That was really unusual. I think I like it. I think it was a good play. I'm just trying to decide kind of like the right way to address it in this case. I could play 3 into Thailand. That makes it really difficult to coup. And 1 into Panama here. I think I don't necessarily hate that. Makes things a little bit tougher for him. Makes him wonder, since I assume he's not holding Central America scoring. I think I like the idea. 4 in Thailand makes it almost an impenetrable target here. And I would be able to drop defcon before it really gets out of control. I did like that move with ABM and Trady, though, I have to say. So, Asia right now is scoring 6 for him. Problem is he's just got so many coup targets. That was a really good place for him to draw nuclear subs. The question is if he's going to be able to materialize anything with it. I am wondering if I don't just quagmire him right now to waste these nuclear subs turns. That could potentially be a pretty strong play if he misses some of them. So, what are my options? I can't coup Thailand myself right now. If I coup anything else, he can play into Thailand. So, let's go ahead and take Thailand back. It's just too important. And we're going to buff up Panama for whatever that's worth. And we'll see what he decides to do. I do have the China card as kind of like a get out of jail free here in Asia, even assuming he coups with a 4-op card and rolls a 6 on it. That's not really like the end of the world or anything, since I can take it back. So he plays arms race for the event because he wants to get a little bit further ahead there. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think I'll take this opportunity to try to redress some of the balance in Asia. Keep him busy with kind of like those non-battlegrounds and stuff. So we'll probably coup. Does Indonesia make sense? I think I don't mind Indonesia with kitchen debates. So we coup that pretty well. That gives me a hefty lead in Southeast Asia, and it's definitely making the rest of Asia a little bit more challenging for him now that I can potentially catch up with him a bit more in non-battlegrounds. And the most important thing is if I can, really stop him from being able to take too much advantage of... Okay, so that's pretty solid. I want to stop him from being able to take too much advantage of some of the stuff here with nuclear subs. So playing like this, I think, is pretty strong. Among other things, if he wastes time cooing Uruguay, that's time that he's not spending cooing battlegrounds. So I think that that's probably pretty strong. So let's see what happens here. If he coups Brazil again, which is the softest target, I've got a nice realignment target. And I can also just walk into Argentina overprotected. It's pretty difficult for him to kind of flip there. Okay, so what are my other priorities here? I'd like to get 2 into Iraq to get ready for a Muslim revolution at some point. Africa is all of a sudden, quite a bit less important than it would have been otherwise. OPEC scores me 2 right now, and if I take Egypt, that becomes an extra 1. I get 5, 6, 7 is 3 more turns. So he did decide to go for Uruguay. That makes a lot of sense. I think in this case, I like that he's wasting time cooing non-battlegrounds. And interestingly enough, he was also cooing with Nixon plays the China card, so it's not like he's got like a lot of ops at his disposal here. I'm trying to decide if I play OPEC. OPEC actually is worth 3 right now because of Venezuela. I'm debating playing the China card here. If I play the China card, I get Egypt is worth 1 point from OPEC. I can play into Argentina, set up a realignment in the worst case scenario here, and probably I would also want to play one somewhere else. But on the other hand, what is the best choice? Maybe I just quagmire him right now. The mid-round quagmire, I think, is pretty unexpected. He might be sitting on some nasty events for himself, though, so I don't really want to make that too easy. Let's space Camp David instead, and I got the 2 points. Like I like to say, a successful space is never really a waste of time. So we're at 8 points at this stage. Southeast Asia is definitely looking a lot better than it ever did previously. So I really like that. He goes for John Paul II. That makes a lot of sense. Again, I don't know, he's wasting like a lot of time that he could be spending cooing battlegrounds. So it's not really like the worst thing in the world. We'll go ahead and play Romanian abdication there. I have to use it for something. In this case, it gives me access to Poland. Okay, so 6 and 7. I think I like the idea probably the most of headlining Quagmire next turn. And I think I will probably just go ahead and take the 3 points from OPEC. I don't necessarily mind that. He goes for the Korean War to space. That makes a lot of sense. He fails on it, which is pretty great. So we'll probably take those 3 points. I'd like to take Egypt, but, you know, Sadat's coming out, so that's a point that I'm putting in literally only for OPEC, and I don't really love that. So let's see what he does there, and then I totally plan to Quagmire him on my opening round next turn. So nuclear subs didn't really do too much for him here. The good news for him, I guess, is that he gets back up to DEFCON 5 next turn, but, you know, there are things that can drop that, things like the Cuban Missile Crisis. So let's see what it brings. That was definitely a really interesting turn, though, since you know, we spent it at such a high DEFCON. One of the things that I find interesting is that there are a lot of people that get really uncomfortable at high DEFCON numbers. He clears me out of Venezuela, which is a good one, I'm not going to lie, but I still have access to it. So, you know, OAS founded could be a problem, but being able to play Quagmire at DEFCON 5, I think that this is a really good opportunity. So I got South America scoring, and I also got Southeast Asia scoring. Both of those are actually quite good for me right now, and I definitely don't see any reason to kind of wait on my initial plan of playing Quagmire here. That's probably the best opportunity I'm going to get for it. If he bear traps me here, that would definitely be, you know, hilarious, first of all, but also it means that the entire game could come down to a few die rolls, because at DEFCON 5, you can make a lot of stuff happen. So let's see what happens. We got Latin American Death Squads, so that's a pretty good one. The good news is that he's also Quagmired, so I like that a lot. So let's just think through what my options are here. Southeast Asia scores for 3. South America scores for 6. With him presenceless, it's going to be quite a stretch to try to establish that control here. So, unless I've totally done my math wrong, I actually win right here, because 6 points from South America, 3 points from Southeast Asia is 9, and that's going to be the game. So let's go ahead. He has to waste this turn, so unfortunately this is GG. I would say that I definitely got a little bit of luck there, but yeah, that was definitely an interesting and very short game. I think he played a very good game in the early war, but just, you know, being able to spread so much in the mid-war regions that early. Being able to spread that far in the mid-war region so early can be really hard to catch up with. So I guess that's it. That's the game. So that's turn 5 and 20 VP. Like I said, I think he played well, but it is interesting. He actually did have quite a few ops to play with here. He says, no worries, good game, well played. He had quite a few ops to play with, but I feel like, yeah, just some of the way that the luck worked out, especially with being able for me to take Thailand back there, was a big swing. And being able to get into South America, I think that all things considered, he should have considered realignments in South America earlier in the game. That probably would have been pretty strong for him. But he definitely played a very tough early war, and if Asia scoring had come out at the right time, I would have been in serious trouble. So I guess that's the game.